I thought today's dual episode was excellent, although I was quite surprised that when I tweeted my positive thoughts this morning, some of you didn't care for today's episode. I'll be curious to hear your reasoning down below. I liked today's episode because it was new. It was new. It was not overly rushed cliff notes of classic X-Men stories that I already know. Now, I know some of you don't know all the classic stories, so you want to catch up. That's fine. But it's frustrating to have seen in the first couple of episodes great stories kind of butchered so that you're not even, for those of you who are new, you're not even learning anything. So this was great, though. I thought this was fantastic. I felt bad they didn't include this for press in advance because it would have made me feel a lot better about the series going in. All right, and also the Easter eggs. So many Easter eggs. It brings back memories of the X-Men's best days, which hopefully the MCU will bring back. And you know what? Maybe the upcoming latest relaunch of the X-Men comics will help as well. I don't have high hopes. I don't even like the team-ups already. Don't love the talent that they have behind the comics. But I'll give them a whirl anyway. Gotta stay optimistic. Let's see them. Let's see them. It's time for a reboot of the X-Men in the comics and in live action. But this isn't a reboot. This is a continuation of the popular animated series. And today I really liked it. So yes, today's episode though was actually 2 episodes, which surprised me. I knew they announced it in advance, but when the episode started, and it was still only about half an hour, so and it was still counted as one episode. They didn't drop episodes 4 and 5 today, so I was like, I guess they changed their plans or whatever. But no, it was 2 episodes in the span of the time it usually takes to tell one, but I feel it was the best one yet still. So Motendo, and then the first half of Lifedeath. All right, so let's start with Motendo, where Mojo of Mojorworld fame goes all Jumanji on Jubilee on her birthday with a gaming system that he sneaks into her room somehow, which makes her the star of her very own game. I didn't recognize the voice actor behind Mojo, but he seemed like a mix between Josh Gad and Ben Schwartz, kind of, right? It was an interesting take on Mojo. I did like Mojo discussing all of his business concerns, right? He's like doing a little movie mat there, talking about ratings and, other shows that, that could be on, right? Like the Divorce Court for Summers and Grey. That stuff was good. I liked that. That was funny. I was like, oh, that's good. Never been a Mojo fan, but I am very surprised that I enjoyed this episode. All right, but by the way, also, speaking of Easter eggs, did you catch the long shot stuffed toy? I mean, as soon as they showed that with near the gaming system, I was like, oh, that's a trap, Jubilee. That was great. He was also a player option in the game itself. Both he and Spiral are Mojorworld characters. And this is their backstory. All right, it's very soap opera complicated as usual. So the bare minimum is that Longshot was genetically engineered on Mojorworld. He's a humanoid. So he has powers, but he's not a mutant. And he's got 3 fingers, just 3. That's how you can always spot him, and some nice eye tats. But anyway, he's a freedom fighter on Mojo, fighting for the freedom of him and his fellow genetically engineered humanoids from Mojo, from the villain of that world. And then Spiral, though, who already made a cameo earlier in the season, is a human stunt woman who fell in love with Longshot when he ventured to Earth. And then she followed him back to Mojorworld, but his mind was wiped. So he was like, new phone, who dis? Or I guess new brain, who dis? And then she was captured by Mojo, and his top scientist transformed her to her current look. Now, I loved making Spiral a hacker. I thought that was so funny with all her arms. Very, very clever. I was like, oh, what a great idea. Speaking of clever, having Jubilee be a gamer is a very nice nod to how she was introduced back on the original show in a video game arcade at the mall. John Connor style. Also, of course, The Last of Us, right? So that was really nice. I like that. It was also great to see Jubilee use gamer strategy to beat the boss level, to realize there was a pattern and wait for it to repeat, proving she's a legit gamer. I didn't like Roberto insisting he would be better at video games. I mean, that's not what this show is about. I didn't like having that toxic energy here. I'm like, that's not what the X-Men is about. That's clearly not what the people behind the show are like. So, I mean, I know that they're trying to call out certain groups, obviously, and I hope nobody disliked today's episode because Spiral and Jubilee were the main gamers. I hope that wasn't the reason why. But anyway, Roberto is supposed to be one of the X-Men, and so I just felt, I'm sure there are a lot of male gamers who are very welcoming, I mean, I hope so, to women in gaming. So why not focus on that? I think the show lead by example instead of calling out the negativity, I think would be a better thing for this show. All right, so as for the video game itself, a lot of Easter eggs here as well. Not just for the X-Men comics, but also video games in general. I thought that Genosha had definite Donkey Kong vibes. I wish they'd done something like that. I expected them to be running like near barrels and having to jump over stuff, but I guess they were worried they'd get sued. But I could still see the vibe. And then, of course, they heavily referenced the very popular X-Men arcade fighting game from the 1990s. That was awesome. There was even also a Matrix Easter egg, which I'm sure most of you caught, using the telephone to travel through this digital world. And then the game was designed by Mojo, moving to the comics, to be a greatest hits for Jubilee, to kind of want her to trap her in the game, being like, oh, isn't it great to relive your best moments, right? So they had Genosha, Days of Future Past, with the 8-bit animation. I thought that was so great. The Savage Land, Asteroid M. I mean, they really outdid themselves. It was just really great. And I like that it moved quickly to new stuff so that you could still enjoy the Easter eggs, but that was not what defined this part of the episode. So we got what did we get that was new? We got some serious development for Jubilee. So the mysterious hacker figure turned out to be a digital version of Jubilee, who was being used to beta test the game. I love it. They included a lot of video game business talk as well. That was great. And therefore, she was an older version of Jubilee. So not only did she have some very wise advice for Jubilee, that games are a fun escape, but are best in moderation, and that real life is the greatest game of all. Very after-school special, which is also very X-Men animated series. That was great. But Jubilee also got, finally, a power upgrade. And I'm not talking about that stupid idea to make her a vampire from the comics. Hated that. Have they retconned that yet? Last I saw Jubilee, she was still part vampire. And it's one of the dumbest things they've ever did. And she's not like she went and teamed up with Blade all the time either. She just was some rando vampire. All right, so here, she could basically roller skate with her fireworks that apparently can come out of her feet as well as her hands, as well as have better control over the fireworks themselves to create things like laser discs that can cut through metal. She also was able to create like this huge blast by combining their powers with the real Jubilee. I loved it. In just 4 episodes, this show has done an incredible job upgrading Jubilee, who, was very big in the animated series, and she was a great member of Generation X, that comic book back in the day. But, I think Jubilee always had potential, but it's never really been realized. Until now, they're actually doing it. Not only animating her original powers hypnotically, I mean, still, her dancing in that first episode. It was one of the best pieces of animation I've ever seen. But now evolving her powers in a way that makes her more of an asset to the team in the field, I think that's really been something that's held her back. They're like, what are we going to do with her fireworks? I mean, back in the day in Gen X, they promised that something exciting was going to happen. They're like, oh, you have no idea what you can do with your powers. And then they decided not to figure it out. But so not only is she now more of an asset in the team, she's got more mobility, she can do more damage, but that they still were able to keep it with the strong 80s and 90s theming that has always defined Jubilee. She even stuck with the mall theme, calling out her older self for looking like she came from Hot Topic. And then she deployed the shades. It was fantastic. She was still Jubilee, but better. I really, really thought that was fantastic stuff. And her powers, by the way, provided some very nice mood lighting for her first kiss, which turned into a full-on makeout session with Roberto. Who, by the way, still, speaking of powers, he hasn't really even powered up yet. I mean, I thought they gave a good excuse where he was like, he could be on the news and his mom might see. And he would, he's been talking about how he's worried about his family's reaction. But it's time to power up already, Roberto. Let's rip that Band-Aid off. But this was a great moment. Very 80s, very teen soap opera, very X-Men. And as I said, it turned into a full-on makeout session. They let them start to lie down in the bed as they faded out. Spicy! As I said, this X-Men is for adults. It was funny. I thought it was funny they did that. Speaking of spicy, I appreciated Magneto's clapback on Gambit at the beginning of the episode when Gambit's like, oh, are you taking coffee orders, mon cher or whatever? And then Magneto's like, I'm giving orders. And I'm like, oh, you need something for that burn, Gambit? Oh my goodness. It was great. It was great. I'm not used to Gambit taking so many hits though. He's usually a lot suaver. Also, no way the X-Men are eating muffins for breakfast, especially because they got to go wear spandex right after. Wolverine was like handing around that muffin plate. The muffins, they look good. And I was like, are these breakfast muffins? There's no way you guys eat muffins every day. But if Jubilee's having muffins for breakfast, she spent her birthday calories already. Save them for the cake later in the day. But I do continue to love X-Men group activities. They all sit around the table in the morning eating muffins. Oh, it was hilarious. Which muffin would you have taken? I think there was a chocolate chip, I think. I'm remembering off the top of my head, but you'll be able to see the picture here. There was like a chocolate chip muffin, but also some kind of, it seemed like a cherry muffin, which I think I might have gone for. But you can only eat part of it because, again, you got to wear the spandex later that day. Wolverine and Rogue still benched, for shame, even with the original voice actors. But you know who's not benched? Storm, who also, of course, is voiced by the same actress from the original series. And it's so nice to see her getting so much attention on this new show. I think this is what we're all hoping is going to happen with the X-Men in the MCU, with a comics-accurate Storm, no colorism, thank you, front and center. Oh, they got to let Ryan Coogler cast this role. I think that's crucial. Now, as we discussed last week, Storm and Forge were a couple in the comics, and I said there was a very specific reason that they broke up. And they did it here, and they did it quickly. We already got there. And that's the reason, as you discover here, that Storm learns that Forge helped to create the technology that took her powers. By the way, speaking of calling people out, I can't believe they actually had Storm say, when are you going to learn never to trust Washington, D.C.? And I was like, woo! Bold words for an animated show from a major corporation. But, some truth to them, I think. And interestingly, we're in a weird political space where I think everybody would probably agree with that. But it was crazy still to hear that. I was like, how far society has come. All right, so I got to say, while they make an absolutely gorgeous couple, I'm like, wow, you guys are both very hot. And together, love it. But I thought Forge had a lot of nerve telling Storm that he loved her right after revealing that he was the one who was responsible for breaking her. I was like, I knew what he was going to say. I was like, don't say it, Forge. This is the worst timing ever. You got to be nuts that this is when you're going to say it. There is no way, even if she does love you back, that she is not going to be super upset in this moment. And as she did, slap him across the face. Storm can definitely hit him harder than that. He deserved it. What he did to her was horrible. That he didn't tell her immediately was horrible. Why was that his opening line? She can't hit him with a lightning bolt. He should have been like, I feel awful. The government stole my technology from me. Let me make it right by fixing you. But, he did make a fool out of her. I felt really bad for her. I was like, I don't even know if Forge can come back from it. He handled it so poorly. I was totally Team Storm there. I love Storm. She's great. I'm loving the mohawk, by the way. Of course, some of you had mixed feelings about giving her that look, even though it is from the comics in the show, but I think she's rocking it. It's great. And to see Storm's pain of not being whole, I thought was really moving. As fast as they only had about 7-10 minutes to tell, I think it was actually 7 to 8 minutes to tell this part of the story, but they made me feel that emotional beat multiple times. And it worked perfectly to bring in the Adversary, who was actually the owl who had been following them. When you're an X-Men member, you would take coincidences a little bit more seriously. Who's that weird owl following us around? And why is the wind never changed? Whatevs. I'd be like, clearly, you have a problem. I was surprised at first that it was more like hallucinations. I was like, Sinister, that you? But no, it was the Adversary, who I do not remember from the comics at all. But I Googled quickly and discovered that this was a demon who Forge is tussled with in the comics, who feeds on pain and suffering. And they had the actress who does Storm's voice do the Adversary voice as well. It's actually a male character in the comics, but it's a demon. It could be whatever it wants. And I thought, I'm excited to see where they take this story. Obviously it's going to end with Storm getting her powers back, but maybe a new costume as well. Oh, I love it! Fashion change! So X-Men as well. I don't love the Hellfire Gala, as I told you, but I do love a new look for X-Men characters. I love it when they get new costumes. Also, I love this Easter egg with Forge when he was on X Factor. X Factor has been a different couple of teams, but this was when they were run by the government, with Val Cooper heading them up, who, by the way, is on this show, so I'm surprised they didn't have any pictures of her, but I guess she is the one who technically maybe stole the technology from Forge and used it for evil, but he could have had like some darts in it or something. I don't know. But the reason I liked seeing this is that this was a great team. This is some great X-Men stories and iconic covers. Really one of the best. And some of these characters have gone on to have great stories. Multiple Man as a Private Detective was a great comic in the last couple of years. So just to see them, I was like, I love those guys. Let's bring them back. So that just was great. Also, speaking of fond memories, Forge has always loved to rock short shorts. So this was a nice callback as well. I love that he has pictures of himself on his wall. He's like, it's too good not for the world to see. I'm like, seriously, Forge, you just tacked up a photo of yourself here? And he's like, yeah, look how good my legs look in that photo. Bam. All right, so I'm so happy to see X-Men 97 move in this direction. And I heard next week's episode is pretty incredible. So this is very, very exciting. For me, at least, I'm really loving it. Especially because I'm not getting new X-Men stories from the comics. So I'm getting them somewhere. Thank you, Disney Plus and Marvel so far. I feel better. And I've loved the What If seasons. So I'm feeling really good right now about Marvel animation. So what did you think of this week's dual episodes? Finally, great animation from Marvel. Oh, it's exciting stuff. What did you like or what did you not like? I'm open to hearing your thoughts. And do you think the upgrade to Jubilee should be used in the comics and eventually live action? Oh, it's exciting stuff in my opinion. Exciting, exciting stuff. Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.